This is the Real Footy Podcast. Coming up, new season, new rules and footy. The men's game was back with a vengeance. Comebacks, upsets, thrillers and a big week ahead at the tribunal. All that and much more.
For Port Adelaide, and he loved it.
Now Jackson delays the hand pass nicely. Langdon check side. Has he got enough? Oh my word, he is! Melbourne have got two in a minute.
Jimmy Rowe from the pocket. What a chance he's got here. He's going nuts already. Oh, look at that. He's bursting.
Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Gleeson and joining us this week, Chief Football Writer Jake Nile and former Chief Football Writer and still First Lady Football, Caroline Wilson. Welcome to you both.
Hello, Michael. Hello, Jake. What a fantastic weekend it's been.
Yeah, it was, the footy looked better, I think.
Yeah.
And the rules, all the controversies about subs, etc., but the bigger impact seems to be the man on the mark has created a different mindset among the coaches, at least for the short time.
And the 75 interchange, I think, made a big difference as well, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it did. But I reckon the bigger one is the man on the mark, because the coaches seem to be, most coaches seem to be trying to attack. Although we'll see how long that holds. Because typically the other thing that happened is young players seem to do well on the weekend. The Swans, I just thought was amazing what they did, and that would have excited a lot of people.
Yeah, not least the big power group of presidents who've been trying to get rid of those Sydney Academy, and they've diluted, and not only did the two young blokes make an absolute impact day one, but I think was Mills and Heaney were their two best players.
Yeah, Goldman was great.
Yeah,
but the 23rd man too, sneaking that in, and then immediate impact in round one, in the first game of the season with Vlastuin going off, and then Oscar McDonald coming on and having an impact.
Unbelievable. That was just unbelievable. And the minute McDonald came on, you just knew that Damien Hardwick would find a way to get Jack Ross on. I really don't like that rule. We sat here last Monday and we didn't know yet what was going to happen. And it's just extraordinary that
terrible process.
The so-called concussion sub, that not one sub came on for concussion. Not one.
Well, no. I know you would have probably spoken to him. You would have spoken to him on 3AW. I spoke to Lee Matthews, who had the view that really it should just be open slather.
That's
either be open slather,
slather
or concussion. I think Lee just said open slather, but I think it should either have been concussion, which is clear for the doctors. Now we've got this whole.
But the coaches didn't even know why it morphed from the discussion around a concussion sub into a broader injury sub.
Well, not according to Steve Hocking. He said that's what the coaches wanted.
No, according to Alistair Clarkson, they wanted a concussion, or they raised the concussion sub, and then it went from that to broadened out into a medical sub. To
use the grand final as your support case, I just found absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's a war of attrition. To compare Gary Ablett to Nick Flostone when clearly everyone saw that Gary Ablett stayed on anyway, that the coach thought an injured Gary Ablett was better than his next best man, probably to his detriment.
Well, they wanted to keep the rotations, though.
And he didn't have an option. Like, if there was a player fresh sitting on the bench,
plus
it could have been subbed in, they would have done it.
There's no next week.
Do you think Flostone will play this week?
I think it's doubtful, because I know what you mean about getting Jack Ross on, but if you're determined to make a change, it's not Vlastuin that you're trying to take out of the game.
I'm not saying that he wasn't injured. He was clearly injured, but Damien Hardwick virtually after the game, I thought reading between the lines, he sort of said we'll find a way whenever we need to.
And I think he'll play, and that will be the challenge to the rules, because the rules are constructed to say unlikely to play. The doctor believes at that time it's unlikely they will be able to play in the next 12 days. Now, the assumption you have from that is that the player doesn't play the next 12 games. But it's not that. It's actually challenging the doctor to say, make a call. 12 days, sorry. Yeah. If I said games, I didn't mean it. 12 days. the umpire can, the doctor quite reasonably has to guess at that point. Well, he's got a bad knee. I don't know how he's going to pull up in the next week, but right now he can't go back on, and he may miss the next game.
As we talk here now, Jake, we think Patrick Dangerfield will get 3 weeks. I just feel it might be lessened by a Geelong appeal, but where do you stand on that?
I think that there's no choice. That I'm writing. By the time a lot of people have listened to this, I've written this. The high speed bump is gone. But basically, if you choose to bump at velocity, people talk about the bump. I think you can bump now at close quarters. Remember Mark Williams said a number of years ago he felt that the bump, you basically had to look at getting rid of the bump. I don't think you get rid of the bump. I think when players are around the ball and they're not accelerating at the contest, I think you can bump. I don't think you can line up someone like from a distance coming into a contest. Jake Kelly had disposed of the ball. He has a right not to have his lights turned out, even though it was accidental head clash.
He didn't line him up. That's unfair.
He not lined him up, but he didn't pull up.
No. So the argument would be, was contact inevitable? Because he couldn't tackle him because he got rid of the ball. So what else is he to do? The query with that...
Not bump him.
Well, that's right. He has a duty of care not to avoid injuring that other player.
He's got to be suspended.
And they changed that rule 2 years ago. I'm surprised that there'd be any debate about it at all.
No, he has to be suspended, and he will be suspended. And it has to be, it's a question of whether it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks, really.
No,
that's the only real debate.
I think they've already assessed that. I think that's already been established by previous cases that if the schedule goes to 2 weeks for high impact and then it's a direct tribunal referral, it's obviously one step above for severe. It has to be minimum 3.
We have the
Logically, it has to be minimum 3.
The backstory to this, Caro, of this is the AFL Players Association president, and we have this massive discussion of concussions and of players from the past. Now, okay, people can say that's too long a bow to draw them into incident, but that is the backdrop to this. We have this disconnect between what the AFL says about concussion and what clubs and coaches say about when it's a star player who's up for a case.
Particularly
and we live in the moment. We live in the moment. And we all like Dangerfield. He's a great person and he's a magnificent servant of the game.
He did the wrong thing.
He made a mistake and he's going to have to be suspended.
Particularly when you feel that the AFL and the Commissioner are kicking the ball down the road a bit, don't they? They're putting off what we feel is going to be an inevitable clash of, there are going to be massive legal cases. You just think that this is on the brink, this whole concussion debate, and commissioning another study and employing a couple of extra people isn't going to cut it for me. Well, anyway, we know Jake Kelly won't play this week.
Yep.
We know also that we're not going to see Matt Rowell for a while. That was probably the most disappointing.
Oh, I just wanted to, I must admit, when I watched the Gold Coast Suns, a lot of it is about wanting to see what Matthew Rowell can do.
Yep.
I think a lot of people in football just want to see, can this young man, because someone up there said to me, this guy, believe me, he can revive this whole club. He is that good. And he could be a Dustin Martin level player, a different sort of player, but a player that has the capacity as such a young player like Chris Judd to completely transform a team. And here he is with his injury. I felt, oh no. When he went down, I went, oh please, just let it be a...
Because he's really now only played probably 4 games and 2 quarters because he was injured in the 5th early and he was injured in this one early. And the surprising thing is he looks like such a robust figure in the way he plays a game. He looks like almost like if you thought it was an Anderson, you might look at him and go, okay, well, he's a bit looser, he's a bit rangier, maybe injuries come to him. And okay, he plays a combative style, but the injuries he's got, this is the surprising thing with this sort of, they expect it to be a PCL injury and that'll be anywhere from 10 to 12 weeks. They don't actually know how to rehab this for a midfielder because it's such a non-midfielder injury. It's more of a ruckman type collision injury and how does it affect a midfielder's game?
Does it give Stewie Jew, Caro, a little bit more leeway in how he's on a 6-month contract? Of payout, like Leon Cameron.
Like most coaches really now.
Well,
the majority.
I don't think Clarko is.
No, but more are than are not.
Simon Goodwin, interestingly enough, is not. So the AFL, inverted commas, AFL franchise coaches are going to be in that position pretty much.
Yeah, and I'm just saying there are more clubs now financially beholden to the AFL, so this is going to happen more and more. No, I don't think so. I think that they've got enough good young players
to weather.
Well, you'd have to improve this year. You don't have to make finals, but you've got to improve.
Did the Dangerfield suspension or tribunal citing overshadow what was a pretty bad loss for the Cats, and that they should be drawing more heat for losing that game?
Oh no, I think that was the upset of the round. I mean, I know Sydney was a big upset.
They need to wear that.
They do, and look, they look slow. Adelaide looked fast. Tex Walker looked about 24, and I mean, there's been a lot of talk that the new rules are going to suit him, and certainly round one, he seems to be the biggest beneficiary. But no, Geelong just. All the predictions that were they a bit old and were they a bit slow, and we heard both the coach, the captain and Patrick Dangerfield complain about the length of the games pre-season, and there was this feeling that fatigue might set in for them. I think that was
I think
big
they, as an older
Bulls.
team, I thought that they were they didn't look ready for the season. They look like a team that's come off a shorter pre-season, fewer games, and they'll be better than that, but they're not. The other team had all of their mature players compared to most of last year. All of their better players were fit again and on the field, and the young guys come in. They're all fit and fast, and they came with a plan to hunt Geelong the way Richmond hunts, and then they just got momentum.
They did,
and at home.
And with the off field, I mean, Jeremy Cameron, 2 hamstrings now in a month, which is a real concern. The debate about where Patrick Dangerfield should play again.
Well, that's not going to be a debate for a couple of weeks.
No, it's not. But I mean, the same old questions. I thought Adelaide, that was a staggering result. The wooden spoon up beating, one of the grand final teams, and obviously Sydney as well was just.
And now Buddy could be back.
Wow. Well, they need, given all the money they're paying him, I'm sorry to go on, but you look at what Alir has done, already. He's made an impact at Port, even though he wasn't one of their best.
How many Essendon supporters were texting each other on...
Orazio.
I mean, because as soon as I saw him, I was just reminded, he's a very good player.
Yeah.
When he plays, he just hasn't played much.
But with the money, the Buddy money clearly must have affected the decision to get rid of Alir.
No, it absolutely did.
And so you really hope he does come back and play a few games this year, because they could have done with Alir this year. He would have been fantastic in that side.
There was a sense from looking at Logan McDonald. I think Logan McDonald looks very, very promising for the Swans.
He does.
Sydney are moving on from the Buddy Franklin era. It's coming to a close, and this is the year he's being paid the most on the contract on paper, but they are now opening a new chapter, and it's time, and it's really timely for that club and for the Sydney market to have these local players, these 2 local players who played so well as well as a young West Australian, as well as Isaac Heaney and Callum Mills. Having some Sydney-based players at that club, I think, is very important.
Well, the other Sydney team, that was a bad loss for GWS, and a phenomenal victory for St Kilda, given the manpower they had out. And I think, look, the weather conditions probably helped St Kilda in an undermanned team to grind and fight.
No real opposition in the ruck either, so which they'll face this week against Melbourne. You would think no ruckman coming back this week for the Saints. It was a brave win, wasn't it? Because once GWS got in front, you just went and as good as Cornelio OSC was in the votes, but he didn't seem to hurt them at all. And you've said this before, Jake. Their midfield they're just very similar, aren't they? All the players.
Yeah, they've had
Hopper.
Well, they had an oversupply of actually inside players. Kelly was a player that they really need to fire at the absolute top of his game, and obviously, Whitfield's enormously important. But yeah, there's something not quite gelling, and they've lost Cameron, they've lost Zach Williams. It'll be interesting to see what effect that has over the year. There's a lot of pessimism about the Giants going into this season when. Previous years, they've been seen to have one of the best lists in the game. I don't think people think that now.
Well, to be brutal, you watch that Amazon documentary and you just feel that Leon Cameron is sort of coming to the end, and you feel that the leadership at the club has got some real issues. I know that a lot of senior people at the club just haven't even watched it because they come out of it so badly.
Yeah, they do.
Which is I mean, but I still tipped them because I thought St Kilda was so undermanned.
They were so
They're
undermanned.
playing at home.
Yep.
Always tip the home teams in round one. You know, my mum's rule. Phil went horribly
How did that
wrong
go?
there. Horribly wrong.
But so Brisbane as well, as good as Sydney was, that's a bad loss for a team that is shaping up as a top four, should be a top four team, and now goes down to Geelong, who's come off a loss. That's a sort of tantalising game now Friday night. Both need that win. As early in the season as it is, they need that win.
They do. Geelong will go in favourites, surely.
It's
at
down
home.
there, yeah.
At
Yep.
home.
Oh, look, Brisbane. That was very disappointing. But that is the it's only round one, but sort of game.
A few blokes sort of dropped their shoulders, though, didn't they? I mean, Charlie Cameron symbolised that, but you just felt that a lot of them got the sooks a bit. I don't know. That was a body language I perceived watching that game, as Sydney got more and more exciting, and it was a big win. You know.
Well, the other thing about it was a John Longmire coach team, and there's been critics of his coaching style of being defensive. 19 goals.
I know.
So I mean, that to me was like, if you were the AFL, I think the AFL would have just loved the round.
Oh yeah, they're
Swans kicking all these goals.
They're patting themselves on the back. They're absolutely
even though
thrilled.
the process for the 23rd man was absolutely ridiculous and in my view indefensible. Well, not indefensible, but just
it was a mistake.
Mistake.
And it just shows that whenever we have spent 6 months or a year making these decisions, it's just a complete furphy. I mean, why do we have the competition committee? I don't think they had a say in any of the new rules. They certainly didn't have a say in that one.
We'll take a break there, come back and look at the Blues and the Pies.
Do you have a question or comment for the team? Send us an email, realfootypod@theage.com.au.
Thumping long ball. Roscoe got out the back. He's got players on if he can get it there. Left foot ball's going to work. Myercheck walks in. Maggie's respond.
Well, that was a rare moment indeed. Brodie Myercheck kicking a goal. There were very precious few goals kicked by the Magpies again in the first round, Jake, and that's become all too familiar.
Well, there's a few issues there with the thing about that game was that Collingwood's midfield got absolutely slaughtered by the Bulldogs, who have an outstanding. They may now have the best midfield group in the competition, and you're thinking about Marcus Bontempelli being someone that they can flip around into other roles forward, or I think they should consider playing him back. But yes, Collingwood got big issues there, and of course they just looked off the pace. Their intensity was just a little bit down. They've always been a team that's played at a high pitch, and they've got some personnel problems both in their forward line and their midfield, and of course that problem of where they station Jordan De Goey, whether they play him in either
poor
position.
game regardless.
Plus,
of where they put him.
the method they play with, they are very conservative. Now that keeps them in games. That's how Nathan Buckley has coached for quite a while now. They were talking over the summer that they were going to be more bold. We did not see that. It'll be fascinating to see what we against Carlton. Carlton, conversely, Caro, I thought were pretty commendable in the Richmond game.
Taking the results from the weekend and what you saw, and it never works out this way, but Carlton would go in strong favourites. I mean, at half-time, you know, when Richmond sort of turned it around a bit and went into that break with, you know, what you thought was not a bad lead for such a tight game, I thought that Carlton have done enough here. Well, they kicked again, and Richmond had to, Richmond had to really work, and we had to see Dustin Martin at his absolute best, which was unbelievable to see again, to beat them. And Sam Walsh just notched up another gear. Obviously, the captain was unbelievable.
Saad was superb. His ball use and run. What a pickup.
Yeah, yet another one.
Yeah. Well, there'll be a feeling of a sort of it's an interesting. It's a little sidelight, but they're both those two clubs for Thursday night are 127 each in wins and losses against each other. So a little tiebreaker there. Not that that'll be what people really talk about.
Well, not the players anyway.
Not the players, no. Eddie Maguire would have been very focused on that if he was still there.
But you talk about the method, like Collingwood playing their wings and pulling them back as defensive wings. They basically pull back and end up playing almost 8 defenders. That's when you can't score, and then you've got a Bailey Smith on the wing just torching you. You sort of think, well, where's the run? Where's the plan to actually transition the ball? And then you've got a bunch of players that are fit. And the ruckman is a query.
Yeah. Well, the Brodie Grundy's performance was, there was a big difference. And Steph Martin, I think a lot of people predicted this. Steph Martin's gone very well against him. Brodie Grundy's centre bounce work for a long time. He's a tremendous player around the ground, but at centre bounces, he's been poor for quite a long time. And they were smashed in the centre bounces. If you look at the clearances, the secondary clearances around the ground, Collingwood actually were ahead, even though they got, outpossessed by some astonishing number.
So the contrast from this time last year with Grundy v English was extraordinary, wasn't it? And I heard Justin Lepich say on radio on the weekend that they've been trying to get him the Dogs for 5 years, Stephen Martin. Yeah. And you felt that Brisbane probably thought he was coming to an end. And, I mean, I don't know what we're going to see for whether he'll play every game, but...
Well, he may not have to play every game. I mean,
Tim English walked a little taller, didn't he?
He might be needed against Melbourne. He might be needed against Collingwood. He needed against the West Coast Eagles.
Great pickup.
It's a great pickup by the Bulldogs. If they'd had him in the finals last year against Ryder and Marshall, the Bulldogs
absolutely,
would have
but also,
progressed.
I think he plays as many games as he can physically play because he gives them such significant advantage in the versatility for English. English can play forward. English can be a marking target and work with Norton, and I think that was really important for them. And, for Collingwood, I think that they need to, Buckley touched on it after the game about, we didn't get Mason in there as often. I think Mason Cox needs to be their centre square ruckman. 90% of centre bounces, he needs to be the ruckman and then roll off and go forward and Grundy ruck around the ground. Grundy's best ability is covering the ground almost like a midfielder, and he hasn't been even running. He's not, he hasn't been doing that sort of work.
Well, this is going to be a big test for Nathan Buckley. Nathan Buckley's going in the last year of a contract. We don't need to be, talking here, death riding him. He's here he is. He's in this position, but to show imagination, Caro. So when he reinvented himself at the end of 2017, Justin Longmuir came in and they basically learned how to defend and they had a much better game plan. Now the challenge is much greater because he doesn't have the playing resources. The playing list isn't as strong. They've lost senior players. Their midfield is no longer in the elite bracket. It's in the middle of the road at best, in my view. I think it's thin. So he's got a lot of challenges about how he, like a cook, how you manufacture something in a game where the rules are going against his style of coaching at the moment.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I do think he's we spoke about it last week. I do think he's under a bit of pressure, and I'm not even sure whether it'll be. I mean, he says he wants to be there going into the future, but I just feel the feeling after round one, again, shockingly small sample, but it's bringing into account all the stuff that went on over the most horrendous off-season for the football club.
And by the way, the trades, off-season. I think the trades are much more consequential to the playing group and the footy department than the Do Better report. The Do Better report is more about the meta club.
Yeah, but it starts at the top and it goes down to the bottom, and the way they handled those trades and everything about what went wrong and the build-up of salary cap problems.
It all gets back to kicking the can down the road for too long, and we can go over that again. But they are where they are because of those decisions over a number of years.
Spoke about Collingwood that they played appallingly and only lost by 16 points, which is part of the fact that they do play a defensive game. So they're never beaten up.
It felt
badly.
like a 6-goal loss, didn't it?
Or 8, yeah.
Oh, I thought the other thing, Darcy Moore. Let's face it. What's the margin if Darcy Moore's not playing?
He's a beautiful player.
Another quick point on Grundy before we move on to Hawthorn, isn't it? Is he hasn't been the same player. Last year, Anthony Rocker didn't go to the hub. Anthony Rocker's also gone to North Melbourne. He's been really good as a ruck coach and as a sort of a mental health coach with Grundy. They'd had a good relationship. He wasn't there, and his form tapered off up in the hub, and he's not been there this year.
Channel 7 reported last night that Collingwood will appoint a new ruck coach later this week.
Later this week.
Yeah, Mark Jamer, I think they mentioned. Yep.
And Carlton though, in defeat, the signs were good for the Blues fans out there, and I thought Patrick Cripps was, after an indifferent year last year, I thought he was a lot better. And Sam Walsh just looks like being an absolute star of the competition and just a player they can bank on for 12 years.
Putting aside the fact that this Hawthorn-Essendon game should undeniably have been played at the MCG, Caro,
yes. Yeah.
You're willing to concede that now?
The Melbourne supporters really let me down. Really let me down. Melbourne didn't.
They
were good, but their supporters...
What was the crowd?
21. 21.
But
even Gary Pert sort of halved it over a matter of about 3 weeks or 4 weeks. But even he, on the eve of the game, the ball being bounced on a 3AW interview with us, said 23-24. And it was a beautiful day.
Beautiful day. Yeah. First game of the year.
Well, those who went were rewarded.
They did play well.
They played well, and they saw some signs of life.
Yeah. The Hawthorn Essendon game, that was the thriller. And
Killer diller.
You have got two teams that, I'm not sure the defensiveness of both teams in that game.
How does that happen? And it happens so often with those two clubs. It's extraordinary. It happened last year, didn't it? The other way around, not quite as
I tell
marked.
you what, too. I know there's longer rivalries and there's rivalries that are more intense in the historic thing. No, not, but Hawthorn and Essendon fans hate each other. That game at the coffee urn at some workplaces in Melbourne there'd be a lot of I don't care now. We beat Essendon. There'll be a bit of that from the Hawthorn crew and the Essendon fans saying, "Oh God, how did we blow that game?" When they played well for a while.
Where do you stand on the tagging question? I mean, we've mentioned Dustin Martin briefly, but Tom Mitchell. I mean, should they have done more to stop Mitchell after half time?
I kind of like the way Essendon kind of look like taking the game on. I'm not sure about that. This is a development year, as they've been open about. I reckon once you've decided that, yes, of course you want to win as many games as you can, but once you've gone into that mode of you're trying to create a really good side rather than an average team that can scrape into the 8, I reckon, I'm not sure. The thing about Tom Mitchell is Tom Mitchell hasn't played good footy for a while with his injury, and I don't know that he's the player that oppositions look at as hurting
I thought Will Day was really good. Will Day again the other night.
I thought Tom Mitchell hurt them.
He did hurt them.
Well, he gets the ball.
He did hurt them.
He does get the ball.
But that last play, that after they've kicked the goal, and they just had to keep possession of the ball.
So it was Devon Smith, was it, who kicked a goal? Yeah.
And then Shield manages to just, from the next bounce, it gets pushed forward and they all surge at the ball. And if you go back and look at that goal that O'Brien kicks, the ball gets to half-back and it's just a scrambled, hacked kick from Day forward and it lobs over the centre bounce to the centre circle. There's 3 Hawthorn blokes and there's not one Essendon guy that's held a line back. They've all gone to the ball. Now, it's the last minute of the game. They're just drawn to the ball to try and surge it. But because no one had held a position, there was no one to contest there. No, and the ball just fell to Shield, who then gets it on, and eventually, O'Brien takes a great mark and kicks the goal. But not one Essendon bloke amongst all those Hawthorn guys
went back, and
you just think, gee, where was the defensive line? Where was the player that just hold that position? But the other thing, I mean, Hawthorn, he had some good, that Tyler Brockman and Dylan Moore and these sort of small guys, they played really. There was a good feel about them. And this is a team. Where did you stand? They didn't play Granger Brass, but Connor Downey made his debut. Doesn't get on the ground.
Yeah, that's awful. That's awful. And goes into the middle of the circle after the game. Gets the Gatorade and everything, and he didn't play. Oh no, I don't like putting on a debut player as a 23rd man. I didn't like that.
Oh, what used to happen? There used to be players way back when the 19th man, the 20th man didn't get a run. That was not. It's funny. Well, it wasn't the most. It still goes on their games record, doesn't it? It still counts.
Well, I spoke to Damien Monkhurst out at Hawthorn training the other day, and he famously played. He made his debut, his first game and his 50th game he spent on the bench and never got on the ground. He thought his 100th too, but someone corrected me to say, no, he actually got 17 touches in that game or something.
Oh, okay.
But he thought he didn't get on in his 100th. Must have been his 99th or something. So Eddie just laughed and goes, no, it's character building and, put your ego away.
Well, it wasn't the worst thing about the medical sub, but it certainly added to the pile.
Carlton didn't know whether to give Oscar McDonald his jumper or not before the game. Sort of like, well, it's your first game for the club. We don't know if you're going to get on. Does this count? What do we do here?
Well, he's already a better goal kicker at Carlton than he was at Melbourne, so that's some good start for the Oscar.
And what do you think of Melbourne? I mean, is this a significant result, or again we're dealing with a small sample size? I think.
I saw some really promising signs. I mean, obviously, their defenders, Stephen May was fantastic. Jake Lever was fantastic.
Well, Jake Lever's the bigger thing because Stephen May was good last year. So maybe now Jake Lever's got enough confidence to they've got something going. And Tom McDonald, a little bit of a comeback,
Their synergy, though, I think. And I think that was part of the logic of also bringing, say, Tomlinson playing behind the ball a bit more. You have that extra player that's got the that's got the speed and can be a bit more locked down and give both of those players the freedom to attack the ball in the air and mark the ball in the air. And look, we talked about Oscar McDonald, but Tom McDonald, that was a vintage performance. I mean, one game back.
Good weekend for the McDonalds. But Melbourne went into this year really with a bold mindset. I think a little bit of crash, not quite crash through a crash, but sort of a little bit in that direction where they brought in Mark Williams and they've obviously gone for Ben Brown, who's not there, but trying to play a style where they're backing those defenders, May and Lever, to win contests. They're not going to sandbag the game by putting numbers back. They reckon their backline's good, and now they'll take risks with the ball going forward and try and turn the ball over in their front half, a bit like Richmond. They're playing that way. They're going to try and play that way, and they'll see what happens.
To be fair, they were also playing a Freo side that had Taberner and no one. So it was it wasn't the most challenging game for a tall defender because unless Fremantle was going to bring it in, ground balls and try and...
Well, it's interesting too. As per Dustin Martin, I wrote about this on the weekend, that all these teams with these guns have got this decision about where they play that player. So Dustin Martin creates a conversation about that.
Yeah.
Nat Fyfe always compared. He's going to be a bit like Chris Grant. He's always going to be compared to Dustin Martin, I think, as is Patrick Dangerfield, to Wayne Carey, of course, in Chris Grant's case. Nat Fyfe was 40-60. So he played 40% in the forward line, 60% in the midfield. Christian Petracca played 30-70, 30% midfield, 70%, 70% midfield, 30% forward line. At the end of the game, though, this is the defining thing, where were they both? Christian Petracca was forward and Nat Fyfe was in the midfield because Melbourne had control of the game. So when Fremantle were desperate, where did they put Nat Fyfe?
Well, if it's not getting in,
that's always going to get enough. So this is going to be a decision for all of these teams, and those two teams, Caro.
Well, I mean, and it brings us back to Patrick Dangerfield and the debate on grand final day last year, and should Chris Scott have moved him? I mean, that was a sort of lightning rod for this whole discussion, I reckon. I love seeing Petracca up forward. Love it. I think he's going to be something else this year.
Do you think he can save is he single-handedly capable of saving Simon Goodwin?
No, Jake, no one is single-handedly capable of that, but he's got the coaching setup he wants now. I don't know if he's chosen all these people, but it's completely transformed footy club, so this will be the year that he has to make a difference.
So St Kilda coming off a valiant comeback. We're not sure how many players they'll get back in coming off that win, but they played Melbourne this week. And they are two teams that have...
I think they'll get a couple back, definitely, but they won't get the ruckman. So
yeah,
and
playing against Gawn is going to be a...
that's going to be
Melbourne really should be favourites in that game.
Oh, definitely.
With the personnel.
They'd be disappointed if they weren't.
St Kilda can win this game as well.
That might be
they've really got something happening then.
That might be the worst thing going for Melbourne this week, though, going in as favourites.
If St Kilda can get to round 6, 3-3, I think they'll be really happy. And they could do anything later on in the season. Paddy Ryder comes back and obviously Marshall.
All right, we'll take a break. Coming up, quick questions.
Get access to every episode as it drops. Hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Lynch did well to get the kick away. Backing in there, Curnow, Martin, but don't argue on Jones. The right foot snap. He just does it time and time again.
Well, welcome back and straight into it. Jake, did Thursday night's game prove that Richmond and Carlton should retain their season opening fixture going forward?
Yes.
Caro?
I didn't think they should have been up for debate anyway, so a yes from me. That could change as the season goes on for Carlton, though.
The only shame is that the COVID stuff means that you can't get the 75, 80, whatever thousand, upwards of 75.
Well, that'll change, we think, this week, and honestly, it felt like a lot more than 50,000.
Well, there was a lot of pent-up...
it was the atmosphere was unbelievable.
For football.
It did also feel when you're in the crowd and there's 50,000 there, you're thinking, what difference would it be if there's 70 here?
I know. It was
different?
After the contrast of being there the year ago on that very day with no one, it was pretty good.
What positives does David Noble take out of that loss to Port in his very first game as coach?
Oh, I think a few things. I mean, Jaden Stevenson's game for them was
32 touches
was very promising. I think LDU
great game
was Luke Davies Uniacke, got that right. He's just looking like he's becoming the player that they hoped. I think they're the two standout things. And look, they were outclassed. They were completely
Never
outclassed.
gonna
And
beat
Port
that
Adelaide, let's
Against
just say.
a team we think is probably the premiership favourite.
Well, with Richmond, certainly right up
Mm.
there. And that, by the way, that forward line of Port Adelaide, my God, those small players.
Well-
Connor Rosie's not playing. You put in
I know.
Connor Rosie, who's a class player, with Robbie Gray and
The one thing they lacked
Orazio.
in the prelim was just a bit of composure in the big moments.
Yeah,
and
the game was on their racket.
And now they've got Orazio Fantasia, who had a lot of composure.
Yeah, and Alir, I think, is a more than handy pickup. So yeah, but I think that David Nobles, they're going to struggle. They're not going to win many games. They challenged them early, and they were just beaten by a team that's just much, much better. So it's not. I don't think North supporters should be too. This is a development year.
Okay. Favourite moment of the round?
Look, I've mentioned this already, but definitely the mature age rookie, Jimmy Rowe, kicking his first goal for the Adelaide Football Club and his father, Stephen, calling it on 5AA.
Yeah, that was good.
You don't often, as a commentator, get to call your son in his debut kicking a goal for the team that you used to play for. I thought that was just a wonderful moment. Good boy, good boy.
I thought it would take raising the two flags might have taken some beating for you, but that does upstage
Oh,
it.
I'm talking about what happened actually on the field. But yeah, no, that was pretty emotional. That was pretty emotional.
Yeah, I think that the end of the Hawthorn-Essendon game with Tim O'Brien, he's a maligned player. He's a player that a lot of Hawthorn fans, whinge about. And here he was having his moment, probably the moment of his career, maybe. I mean, where he's sunk Essendon, the team that they despise, with the last kick. Yeah. So I think
just stick the knife in, Jake.
No. It's not. I feel sorry for the Essendon fans, but I think that it was a good moment for an individual. If anything, I wanted Essendon to get up just for a tip.
The way he took the kick was just extraordinary too. Could have gone anyway. What about you? Did you have one?
Well, I actually quite like Joe Danaher kicking a goal and actually getting back out there. I'm not completely convinced, although I did like the schadenfreude of him grabbing his jumper and shaking his jumper. It's like, Joe, you've been there a minute. What are you really? That's really signalling something to Essendon about where he is. But I also, it was more of a wistful or sad moment. But when Rail went to the bench and Stewie Dew was coaching from the bench, or Dewey as he's apparently called by
Dewey,
the Prime Amazon thing, and just sort of put his arm around him, and it was sort of like you felt for both of them. You just felt for Raul and certainly for Stewie Dew as well. But that is all we have time for this week. Thanks to both Jake and Carrot for joining us, and to Channel 7 and Fox Footy for the audio we've used in this episode. As always, don't forget to subscribe, rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.